Hi, I'm Marty Levinson. Welcome to the Northtown Neighborhood News Magazine.
Hi, Marty. I'm the real Marty Levinson. Keep on cutting.
Hi, I'm Marty Levinson. Welcome to the Northtown News Magazine.
Hi, I'm Marty Levinson. Welcome to the Northtown News Magazine.
Come on, baby, don't you wanna go? Come on, baby, don't you wanna go? Back to that lemon light city, sweet Hope, Chicago. 224 446. Come on, baby, now get your business fixed. Come on, honey, don't you?
Hi, I'm Marty Levinson. Welcome to the Northtown News Magazine show with the greatest cameraman around, Sonny Hirsch, and your host of all hosts, Avi Myers.
Thank you, Marty. Avi Myers, Northtown Neighborhood News Magazine, a presentation of Sonny Hirsch and myself. Dial us up on the World Wide Web at www.ntnm.org. From ntnm.org, you can find all of our shows on YouTube, everything we've done in the last four and a half years. That over 190,000 shows at this point have been watched. Community policing is going through real big changes, but these aren't necessarily bad changes. We'll see how it works out. What's going to happen now is that in the 24th district and in your particular district, things could change. The 24th district is Rogers Park, West Rogers Park, and Edgewater, and part of Edgewater. So all the meetings for the 10 sector, which is West Rogers Park, will now be on Thursdays. One being at 5, one being at 6, one being at 7. Which ones will be determined, but it'll be starting in May on the second Thursday. I believe the 30 sector, if I'm not mistaken, meets the third Thursdays. And the 20 sector meets on the fourth Fridays, 5, 6, and 7 also. And within those sectors, people will determine themselves when it's going to be. There's actually a rumor, and I hope it's a true rumor, that they might add an extra community policing officer to each of the districts. And considering how jam-packed things are, particularly in the 24th district, they were talking about maybe getting Carol back as a senior officer, and she could really tremendously help the load. And so much gets accomplished in community policing, people don't give it enough credit. And speaking of those 190,000 plus shows that have been watched, one of the stars of the most watched show ever, and somebody who was introduced to the same tune that the Bulls used to introduce their stars, the Ellen Parsons Project song, is my favorite election lawyer, your favorite election lawyer, and political analyst, and somebody we're glad to have back on, and that is Nally. How you doing, Jim?
I'm doing great, and thanks for having me on, Avi.
First of all, thank you, and it's good to see you. And another election over, you want to talk about the election, you want to talk about the next election. We can talk about anything you want. We can even talk about the Cubs, we could talk about the Bulls, we could talk about the Hawks. The only problem there is that they're still playing, and that could be over by the time we talk about them.
Yeah, I think we wish the Hawks well, and I think the Bulls are looking strong, and the Cubs are better left alone, I think.
Yeah, I agree, but I'm still, it's sort of like, I pride myself that when I'm driving, even though I don't have a car these days, I don't look at the accident. I don't need to see the gore. I can't help watch the Cubs. I just can't.
Yeah, that's a pretty good description, and I don't see much room for improvement this season.
No, but listen, there's always next year. There's always next century.
Yeah, well, I don't know if we'll be around for that, so we got to make it happen this century.
No, I definitely think so, and that would be nice. That would be nice. So what would you like to talk about?
Well, we just finished the second round of the Chicago municipal elections. There were also some suburban elections, so I think it was some very interesting outcomes. I think probably the key thing that people are talking about is that almost a third of the city council now will be newcomers, which is, I think, going to be a very interesting time. There'll be a new mayor, there'll be a new city council, and within that city council, a third of the people are going to be new to the city council.
When I was watching Chicago and Week in Review last week, and this is in relation to when we're filming and not actually when we're airing, and by the way, Joe Weissman, you got to do better with the panel. I mean, you've had better guests in the past. You got to step it up a little bit. But the fact is that there was talk about there being 3 different factions within the city council, being pro-Emanuel, anti-Emanuel, and independents. And they also mentioned accurately that independents often get gobbled by whatever faction. Have you seen any breakdown, or what kind of numbers you think this council is going to be?
No, I haven't seen anything like that, and I think it's premature for people to start creating these groups. Nobody's taken office yet. Rahm Emanuel hasn't been sworn in as mayor, so I think it's premature to say there's going to be a faction that's against him or with him, or a faction that kind of sits in the middle. I personally, in talking to a number of the people I represented who ran and won, it's going to be very much based, I think, on individual issues. And different aldermen will have different issues that are important to their communities. And I think votes are going to break down a lot more that way than just somebody being in lockstep for someone or against someone. I don't see it being as personality driven as that.
Interesting. Do you think that now, of course, Emanuel has talked about cutting the council to 25? See that happening?
That's been floated out there. I don't see that happening. I think that Chicago alderman is an office. I tell people when they come to me and they're interested in getting petitions drawn up and running, I'm saying you are running for the most demanding office in government, without a doubt. And that's because alderman is really an ombudsman. I think any alderman who you may talk to would tell you they get calls on every single governmental issue that affects people living in their wards. People will call about their federal tax returns, or they'll call about some issue relating to their license plates on their cars, or it's the first line of defense in terms of government. It's the first office that people think of when they have any government-related problem. They say, oh, I'll call the alderman. So I think that because of that, it serves a pretty important purpose in terms of being, the intake office for a lot of things in terms of people relating to the entire government.
It's interesting. I heard an interesting analysis from somebody in synagogue. I mean, just not a particular political person, but he was giving his own analogies. Not recently, but I just think it holds true over time. He was talking about that the local stuff's what affects him the most. And for instance, if he didn't like a state rep who might affect him a little tiny bit, he was really happy when she became congresswoman, because that's going to affect him even less. He didn't like his U.S. senator, and he was very happy he became president, because he says, and by the way, I don't think he's exactly right here, that'll affect him even less. But alderman, that he cares about more than anything else in the world, because that's his trash, and that's his sidewalk, and that's his street, and that's his curb, and everything.
I think that's it, and they are a conduit to the other offices of government, because if somebody calls the alderman's office, they will assist them and say, well, you're going to have to call the Secretary of State, and here's the number. You ask for this department. Or you'll have to call the federal government to get some information on your veterans benefits. But, here's the congressman who represents our area, and you can call their office, and they'll have information. So it's really a clearinghouse. And, the other thing is, obviously everybody's looking at this in terms of the big budget issues that the city has to wrestle with. But it's not a real big chunk of the budget when you think about it. I mean, I think, if you were to cut the city council in half, it might be a savings of, maybe $15 million, $20 million, which is, of course, a lot of money, but relative to the entire budget is not.
Yeah, no, $15-20 million. No, that's very true.
And then I think the other thing to keep in mind, Avi, if you recall, and you have to be a little more student of government to remember this, but 30 years ago, each of the representative districts in the state of Illinois had 3 representative spots.
I do remember this. As a matter of fact, I was going to bring that up in the conversation. But go ahead, please.
And there was a referendum put on the ballot, a constitutional amendment actually, to reduce that. And what that had allowed to happen is, with 3 representative spots in each district, people got 3 votes, and they had the ability to cast all 3 for one candidate or split them among the 3 candidates.
Yeah, you could do 1.5, you could do 1 each, and but you couldn't elect more than 2 people from one party.
That's what usually happened, is that even in a district that was overwhelmingly one party, there were enough people of the opposing political party who could get together, and the old term was bullet for their candidate, cast 3 votes for the candidate of their party. And there'd be enough people who could cast 3 votes like that in most representative districts in the state of Illinois, if it were, say, an overwhelmingly Republican district, there'd be 2 Republican representatives and 1 Democrat, or sometimes an independent.
Right.
But I think it gave, in retrospect, even though it did save a small amount of money, it really did, in terms of the representation of people, affect it in a negative way. Because if you happen to live in an area that's overwhelmingly one party or the other, your voice is not going to be heard because you can't elect somebody who is more attuned to your philosophy, who would then go down to Springfield and represent that interest.
And a lot of the Republicans were really Democrats in Chicago. A lot of the Democrats were really Republicans downstate.
Yeah, there were a lot of permutations on it, but the concept was, I think, a good one, and it wanted to make sure that no matter where you lived, you could have a representative who would be philosophically or politically attuned to you, even if you were in the minority in a particular district.
One of the guests we had on, by the way, just so you guys know who we're watching, we're doing 4 shows today, and one of the guests that was on earlier was actually talking about how they went from 177 state reps to 118. It didn't really save money because it actually caused more work, according to him.
Well, yeah, I think everybody agrees that when all was said and done, it didn't save any money, because what happened is the remaining representatives took on more responsibilities in terms of committee assignments and things like that. They had to hire more staff on the committees to help the remaining representatives keep up to speed with everything. So from a cost factor, it was at best a wash.
Yeah, and frankly, the idea of actually, I kind of like the idea, even though I'm not a big fan of huge government. I like the idea that there's more elected officials to take care of your needs, because you can more directly and locally address somebody, and you've got to figure if there's 3 different state reps in your area, because actually there's 118 districts now. There was 59 districts then with 3 each. I got to figure one of those 3 I might actually be able to agree with about something and be able to approach and might actually get something done.
Yeah, well, and so essentially what that showed was the argument that you're going to save an enormous amount of money by cutting the number of representative positions didn't hold water. And I think ultimately when this whole thing shakes out with the city council, you're going to look at the same thing and say, you know what, people are connected with that alderman. People have the ability to come in and see that alderman on Monday nights or Thursday nights when they have office hours, or to call their office and talk to somebody, one-on-one about an issue that they have with any branch of government, and get some assistance with it.
And that's one of the things I really like about it. It's more personal, it's more immediate. And now, who actually is it that votes about cutting the city council? Is that the city council itself? Is it the state legislature?
No, that would have to be, the legislature would have to
Interesting.
enact that, yeah.
So they do that for each of the cities in Illinois?
Well, each city is Chicago has a special charter within the state statutes. So right now it's provided within the statute, and that change would have to come from Springfield.
Right. I know that there's a number of laws that say any town larger than, let's say, they just look at what the second largest town is and just make it more than that, so it's only Chicago.
Right. Yeah. There's a lot of legislation that pertains only to Chicago or only to Cook County. The usual magic number is any county of over 3 million, and municipality within that county or something. But the bottom line is there would have to be legislative action in Springfield to allow for that first.
No, right. That's an interesting topic, but you know what? I'm all in favor of seeing 50 stay.
I just think when people, it's an interesting concept, and in a time when government is looking to save money, it's an interesting idea to say, well, gee, if we cut half the number of aldermen, that would save a lot of money, wouldn't it? But I think if you go through and analyze it, it wouldn't save all that much money. Probably over time, again, with additional committee assignments that the remaining aldermen would have, you'd probably have to hire more staff in order to make sure that they have the support that they need to keep up with things. So again, I don't think it would save any money, and I think you probably would lose that direct connection with people where, the average ward now is somewhere around 55 to 60,000 people. And you would double that, look at it that way. So now every alderman would be representing in excess of 100,000 constituents instead of, somewhere around 55 or 60,000.
No, that's definitely right, and I just think that becomes unwieldy.
Although those numbers will change, because one thing that will happen with 50 wards is they're going to all be redistricted.
No, I think so. And by the way, my prediction for the 50th ward, which is my home base, is because the 49th ward is now short. I'm predicting that the area from Twee to Pratt and Western to Ridge is going to become part of the 49th ward.
There'll be a lot of back and forth about how these wards are drawn because a lot of people have input. First of all, Chicago lost about 200,000 people, so you're going to have to recalibrate each ward now in terms of the total population.
Yeah, it's interesting. It's actually the black population that went down the most, and that kind of surprised me, to be honest with you.
It is interesting. All the numbers aren't in yet, and that'll be refined. But it appears, at least from the initial numbers, it was more on the south and west side where the population loss occurred. So that is the area then where obviously things are going to get reconfigured to a greater degree because, a ward now that was only representing a smaller number of people is the boundaries are going to have to expand.
I think it's safe to say too that the number of Hispanic people within the city, even though I can only speak about the general area here, has definitely increased.
Yeah, there's no question. So, when we talk about redistricting, you were talking about boundaries. There are going to be a lot of things that go into that. Incumbents, first of all. Every incumbent alderman is going to want to have a big say in what their ward looks like because they are going to be running again, most of them anyhow, in 4 years. Now, they were elected under the current ward boundaries and they'll remain in office, but the new ward boundaries will be the basis for the election in 2015. So every current alderman who is thinking of running for re-election 4 years from now is going to say, wait a minute, I want some input. Here's the areas that I want in my ward. You're going to have interest from minority groups in saying, well, there's more Hispanic population now in the city of Chicago. Therefore, Hispanic wards or wards where Hispanic voters will have a greater influence should be expanded because there are more Hispanics in the city. You're certainly going to have African Americans, looking at it from the standpoint that they don't want to lose any seats.
Right.
So you're going to have communities of interest, where particular ethnic groups or particular groups find themselves concentrated geographically and are going to say, we don't want to be split up. Chinatown right now, this is more in relation to the state legislative districts, but there are a number, they've started public hearings on the redistricting for the state reps and state senate districts, which also is going to be done. And my understanding is will be done by May.
Wow.
So, but for instance, there's been a lot of people who live in Chinatown saying, you know what, we've got a concentration of Chinese Americans here. And right now it's represented by, I believe, 3 different representative districts.
Right, I know that, I'm familiar. Well, one of my biggest clients used to be in Chinatown, and we went over, who she's got to talk to in order to, deal with this thing and deal that with another thing and the whole shot.
So, there's movement within communities such as that saying, wait a minute, we've got we've got a community of interest. Why are we in 3 different districts? We should just be in one district, because it makes more sense for us to be in one place rather than split among 3.
Yeah, and frankly, there's more than enough people from the Chinese community, within the city that within the state that they would seem to deserve to have one for themselves.
Well, those are the dynamics that are going to go into
except
redistricting.
That the people who are already in power are going to have more power than people who don't have any power.
Well, there's going to be a lot of different proposals put on the table, a lot of legitimate interests that people have. But again, this all has to be melded into some kind of a final map. So that's why the redistricting is going to be very interesting, because there's going to be incumbents, there's going to be communities of interest, there's going to be geographic things. Just simply, do you want a district, if you've got, for instance, the Dan Ryan Expressway running along here, do you want a district that would make it a nice uniform, say, boundary for a ward that, okay, our boundary on the west or on the east is the Dan Ryan Expressway? Or do you want wards that, start on one side of the expressway and continue on to the other side? So there's geography involved in all this, too.
Yeah, what about just having a district that goes to the second lane on the northbound lanes?
What about the reversibles,
Hey, that's a good point.
In the morning you're in one ward, and in the evening you're in another ward.
Right, and the fact is, depending on how roadkill lays on the road, maybe they're entitled to a vote.
What I'm saying is, I think, joking about this, we're getting into some really actual points of interest that there is a lot that goes into this, and there are going to be a lot of people who want a voice, and there's going to be a lot of input before the final maps are drawn.
No, that's for sure. So, have you ever thought about running for office?
No, I enjoy doing good and helping others.
Smart man. Because it's very hard to do very much good when you're in public office.
You know, as much as office holders are maligned, you know, people like to joke about it, and obviously there's a lot of activity that takes place that's very beneficial. I mean, we can joke about government and people can complain about it and say, you know, there's a reason we have a government. You know, you need an organized society and you need a systematic way of dealing with public issues, and that's what government's for.
The fact is, a good-hearted person, but you know what? You can be good-hearted, but you can also want things that aren't really good for your community or society. And then that's a real danger that people don't realize. Just having a good heart isn't enough. Being sincere is nice, but if you're sincere for things that are going to destroy your community, that's not a good thing. But if a person has an objective outlook toward their community and works together with the people within the community, there is a lot of good that can be done.
You know, I think every public official that you would interview here, Avi, and you have a lot of very prominent people on the program, would tell you it always comes down to, you know, they see it in terms of what they think is the best solution or the best interest on a particular issue, but they also represent people who are in their district, their ward or their legislative district or their city or whatever, and so they have to take that in consideration too. They have to take their own assessment of the situation, but it can't be just that. Then they have to say, but you know, what do people think? How do they know? They attend forums, they get phone calls, they get emails, some complimentary, some nasty, and ultimately people come and vote. And if enough people think that, you know, the common interest is not being served, you know, people are voted out of office.
No, there's no question about it, and it's a good. You know what? Let's take a sneak peek at 2012. You know, we don't even know who's running for anything, but there's a whole bunch of seats that are up.
Yeah, there's going to be a number of offices. First of all, starting at the top with the President of the United States, that office will be up. There's in Cook County, I know Anita Alvarez has already announced that she'll be seeking re-election as state's attorney, so that office will be up.
And by the way, the person who's done the best Marty Levinson of all Marty Levinsons ever.
She was very, very good, wasn't she?
The best.
And I think she's done a good job as state's attorney too.
I like her. One thing for sure is there's no question in my mind she wants to do well.
Yeah, and she came up through that office, as you know, Avi. She wasn't somebody who came from somewhere else and just ran for the office. She was a career prosecutor in that office. So, you know, she really knows the office from the bottom up, and I think she's done an admirable job.
And she's got some really terrific people on staff, too.
Yeah, she's got great people around her, but, you know, that, again, is leadership. It's not enough for you to be elected to the office. You got to put together a good team, and she's done that.
No, absolutely. And you know what? There's two people I really want to mention, and I'm going to have to apologize to them later because I can't think of their damn names, and I can picture their faces this very second. But they're the guys who come along, and I appreciate you people. I'm just an idiot right now. But in any event, and I should have even brought that up, but what the hell. Okay,
yeah, but
so
2012 is going to be very interesting.
So you've got all of Congress. Do you have any senators up?
I don't believe we have any senators.
Oh, wait a minute. Isn't the expired term? No, the expired. No.
No, Obama's term was filled.
Yeah, because it was a partial election plus the regular election
right.
at the
If
same
you remember,
time.
Roland Burris was appointed to fill out the balance of the unexpired term.
Hard to forget, unfortunately.
And then there was, and if you remember, there was that quirky thing where there was a separate election then for voting for the full 6-year term, and then to fill out like 60 days of the remaining part of the term that the courts had determined should have been elected. So that Senate seat is not open, nor is the Durbin seat. But every Congress seat is open. And again, 2012 will be a very interesting election because these districts are all going to be different districts than they are now. The congressional, we are losing one congressional seat in Illinois due to population. So even though Illinois slightly gained population, we didn't actually lose population. But in relation to other parts of the country like the South and Southwest where the population really skyrocketed, and as you know, there are 435 seats, so after every census, every 10 years, an apportionment is made for each state as to, based on population, how many congressional seats they will get. Illinois is going to lose one, even though there was a slight population gain here because there were big population gains in other parts of the country, and they're going to gain seats. So you're going to have, you know, all the incumbent congressmen, somebody's going to lose a game of musical chairs just because there'll be one less chair. And then the boundaries are going to change.
So yeah, it's going to be, and in some cases it might be similar, in a lot of cases it may not be.
Yeah, again, that's everything I'm hearing is that the legislature intends to complete its work in redistricting, which the legislature will redraw congressional boundaries as well as all the state representative districts and all the state senate districts. And that will all be completed, at least right now, according to the legislative timetable, by the end of May.
Very good. So that's coming up pretty close. Now, let me ask you a question. Somebody brought up a point to me that was kind of interesting that I never actually thought about. With the government being in such bad shape throughout the nation, state, country, whatever, county, city, all over the place, what about if we wouldn't have had a runoff election for aldermen? I think the city paid something like $5 million or something for 14 races.
Yeah, well, you know,
I realize that would have cut into your business, but
well, actually, not. You know, most of my business is prior to the runoff, getting people on the ballot so they could potentially be in the runoff. But you know, you never know how many you're going to have. You know, the prior 2007, I think there were maybe six or seven. So there were a lot more this time around in terms of runoffs. But that's the way things are structured. Now, one of the things that's interesting that some of the other states do. You know, right now in Illinois, we staff full precincts. So in any of the wards this past cycle, the 14 wards where there were runoffs, every single precinct there was open from 6 a.m. to 7 p.m. that day with a full complement of election judges.
For basically a race where it's one or the other, where citywide turnout was, what, 27%?
Yeah, somewhere around there. So, you know, one of the things that you and I have talked about since it started is the fact that early voting is getting more and more traction.
Yeah, it was about, as a matter of fact, it was actually over 20, it was about 21 or 22% in the 50th ward.
I think citywide it's running just about 20% in this last election, meaning, as you know from early voting, there's one location in each ward where people can go to vote, a park or a library or public building, and they can go on their own schedule. They're open, you know, Monday through Friday. Most of them have weekend hours of some kind too. And people, you know, while they're out running errands to the dry cleaner, can pull in, run in and vote. It's very convenient. The other thing we have now, as you may remember, is no-fault absentee voting.
Which I think is great.
Which means literally you do not have to give a reason, as you did in the past, why you needed to vote absentee, such as you're going to be out of town or you had some illness that prevented you from leaving the house. All you have to do is say, send me a ballot. So you can send in the application and sit at your kitchen table over a cup of coffee and cast your ballot and put it in an envelope and send it back. I think that's going to be the wave of the future. I think we're going to get away from this concept of election day, and it's going to be kind of election cycle, where people will be able to cast ballots by mail through absentee voting or at a fixed location for early voting.
Actually, I just love Election Day, and even though I could have voted early and walked by Warren Park many times, there's something about walking into the polling place, and it's sort of like some people like to smell the new car smell. I like to smell the polling place smell. I like to say, I can't be specific in a polling place, but Dan Miller, who's one of my Republican election judges who lives kitty corner, I love telling him how lousy all the candidates are on the ballot and hearing him chuckle. But there's something about it I just happen to like. At this point, we're at less than a minute to go. So what would you like? Anything else you want to?
It's just be ready for 2012. There'll be a lot of brand new districts, a lot of new people running, and I think it'll be a very energetic and exciting season.
I don't think there's any question about it. Anyway, I want to thank all of you for joining us today. I want to thank Sonny Hirsch, my entire technical crew. I want to thank Jim Nally, my guest. If you want to reach him, you can reach him at 312-422-5560. Check us out on YouTube for all the shows. Join us weekly. We're trying to do new shows every single week. We're trying to do things of interest. And don't forget to show up at your CAPS meetings. I want to thank all of you for being here today. I want to thank you, Jim. It's always a pleasure to see you. I wish I could get you on more often. But people seem to want to hire you all the time, and you... Well, whatever. Work comes first, the family comes first.
I always enjoy being here.
It's my pleasure, Jim. Thank you so much. Thank you for joining us, everybody. Thanks, Sonny. Bye-bye.